All right, howdy, y'all. I'm going to build on a bunch of themes that we've kind of been talking about today. Maybe y'all can hear me. Maybe I can see this. So, and I'm indebted to Corey Anton for the idea, Death is Life's Picture Frame, and to Gregory Bateson, and I'll talk about that in just a second. In his, this all came from a footnote, by the way. So if you're ever looking for interesting material, read the footnotes because they can turn into speeches and papers. Anyway. So in his book, How We Die, medical doctor Sherwin Newland noted that in many cases, the people who see death the most, such as doctors and nurses, rarely write about it, and the people who rarely see it write about it the most. He listed poets, essayists, wags, and wise men in his group that rarely see death but so often discuss it. And I'll admit to you today that I am not a wise man, and I'm unsure as to what a wag is. I was hoping that Mr. Lyon was going to talk about that, but he didn't explain what that was. So Newland noted that a mythology surrounds death, one meant to disarm the fear of the event. This myth allows us to combine grace with a sense of closure. It is this sense of closure that death offers. It is in this sense of closure that death offers that I would like to discuss in this essay. I will also look at two individual perspectives on death to offer insight, that of the Stoic philosopher Epictetus and of the Albert Camus, the Algerian existentialist. So Corey Anton wrote in his book, Communication Uncovered, that death is not simply a future event that will one day come to pass, as if our only possible relation to it is anticipation. Death is right here, right now, life's picture frame. All things, living things die, but awareness of death is the precondition for life's meaningfulness. Okay? His inspiration for the idea of death being a picture frame came from Gregory Bateson in his essay, A Theory of Play and Fantasy. In the paper, Bateson suggested that we have philosophical frames that help focus our attention on certain data. He wrote, the frame around a picture, if we consider the frame as a message intended to organize or organize the perception of the viewer says, attend to what is within and do not attend to what is outside. Bearing our end in mind offers a way to make meaning of the past, what we have done, of the present, what we are currently doing, and of the future, what we have yet to do. In my opinion, we often see death as an undignified event, but that is an unhealthy perception. Perhaps there is something intrinsically valuable in death. Bioch, in a 2002 work, indicated that the Western world rarely searches for meaning in death, but instead seeks to assign a reason for it, such as people dying due to their dietary habits or negligence during dangerous activities. I'm from the South. All right. But were these individuals to lead entirely healthy lives and survive whatever endeavors they partook in, they would still eventually meet death. In this vein, Bioch also stated that death is central to the meaning and value of human life as experienced by individuals and by communities. Death does not give meaning to life, but does provide the backdrop against which life is lived. Borrowing from and building upon Corey Anton's work, I argue that death gives life meaning precisely by becoming life's picture frame. The picture frame metaphor gives focus. But there are other metaphors surrounding death, and why not use them? So I scoured the Etc. journal looking for some things on death, and I found some, and I'll tell you in a second. Lakoff and Johnson have illustrated how metaphors are not merely the sum of our words, but create conceptual systems that help us define our realities. In this regard, the metaphors we adopt matter in affecting our perceptive world. In his article, The Semantics of Death and Dying, Metaphors and Morality, James Sexton in the Etc. journal noted that death metaphors are culturally constructed and reinforced. He also pointed to the idea that we often substitute various terms for the word death to remove its sting. Sexton offered several phrases found in the clinical setting. Coded, to indicate a patient either died or had a near-death experience. Loss or lost, to indicate a patient, alludes to people no longer being with in the present, such as I'm sorry for your loss or we lost her. All right. Rest, as in laid to rest. All right, implies that we have simply gone to sleep. This last metaphor may be problematic for children when a parent tells them that the grandmother was laid to rest or has gone to sleep, but that they, the children, must also go take a nap. All right. Sexton showed how various death metaphors frame our way of seeing the event, but he issued a caveat stating metaphors as tools may assist us in better understanding life's turns into unknown territory. However, metaphors may also be the bandage which prevents us from exposing wounds which may on some level require attention. The metaphors he discussed and many others surrounding death do not accurately address the clear end death involves. I suggest that by adopting a picture frame metaphor, death may still seem to be an unknown territory, but it may help us see death as closure, as a boundary to life. Much of our lives are mediated by endpoints and edges. Most territories have boundaries. The biological processes that lead to evolution never necessarily a process that involves boundaries, limits, and demarcated checkpoints. Evolution is the result of what occurs within and through semi-porous boundaries. The environment is but a system of functional boundaries. Life, therefore, may be defined by what can be done within the experience of space and time delineated by boundaries. What grieves us at the end of life is generally not what we've done, but the myriad things that we've left undone. Newland suggested that we will all inevitably leave conflicts unresolved, relationships not healed, potential unfulfilled, promises not kept, and years that will never be lived. Accordingly, this unfinished business can often leave us with regret as we grow older. But having a necessary endpoint can add salience to today. So two veins of thought come from Stoicism and existentialism. In this essay, I want to discuss briefly Epictetus and Albert Camus. I know he doesn't classify himself as an existentialist, but it works for this purpose. The Stoics often discussed death in their writings, but typically viewed it as a dispreferred inference, along with other such such issues as weakness, illness, and pain. Death to the Stoics was neither good nor bad; it was just a fact of life. What was deemed important was how an individual approached death. So Epictetus taught that death and pain are not frightening. It is the fear of pain and death that we need fear. So to be confident about death and caution yourself against the fear of it. Accordingly, it is not the event itself that is problematic, but our judgment of it. We associate goodness or badness with an event in our lives, regardless of the realities of the event. To Epictetus, our perceptions of death are a scary mask we wear to cover up reality. He implored us to take that mask off and not see death as a fearful thing. Borrowing from Socrates, he suggested that the fear of death is akin to a child seeing a hobgoblin or a bugbear for the first time. The creature itself may be harmless, but the appearance shocks us because we have not seen it before. But after applying the Stoic concept of negative visualization, wherein a person imagines their death and the closing of this life, we may inoculate ourselves against this fear of death. Epictetus claimed that while we cannot escape death, we can escape the fear of it. The way to escape the fear is to see death for what it is, a boundary, an edge, a way to say that this is where the journey ends. As an endpoint, Epictetus taught that all roads to death are equal, meaning that no matter the manner of death, the outcome is the same for us all. In various places within his teachings, he listed numerous ways people meet their fate: drowning, earthquake, illness, a weapon, etc. Remembering the metaphor of a picture frame, the method of our death may be akin to various patterns, decorations, whatsoever on a frame, accentuating or in some ways grotesquely marring the picture that lies within. Regardless of the aesthetic form, though, it is the function of the frame that truly matters, to borrow from architectural design theory. In this way, all frames are the same, just as all roads leading to death are equal. Albert Camus embodied a different view of death, albeit one that is just as noble as Epictetus, in my opinion. Camus chose to live his life without appeal to an afterlife, instead seeking to live life intensely while it was available. He was indifferent to any future after death, thus making his search for meaning in the present life an imperative. While the Stoics suggested living life rationally without fearing death, Camus argued that we should live life without the fear of eternity. Anton, building on this, had several similar sentiments about how non-being haunts being, how the possibility of future existences haunt the present existence. Camus opted to take the eternity off the table and battle against the absurdity of life in the present. But with this came the understanding that death was the finality of everything. For Camus, the notion of death at the end of life was an ever-present reality. His works indicate someone who understood the harshness of death, look at the plague, and the absurdity of murder, look at the stranger, among other aspects. But rather than accepting a psychological or metaphysical explanation for death, Camus embraced a humanistic notion that was tied to the messiness of human life. His philosophy was not one of explanation, but one of description. Throughout his books and plays, Camus described life in all its absurdity, with death being a central theme. For example, the plague begins with a dead rat and ends with a dead dog. Never mind the many humans that perish in the storyline. A mother's untimely death initiates the stranger, and an execution closes the story. These examples indicate that for Camus, death was closure, an endpoint without which the rest of the story would have little meaning. So why adopt death as life's picture frame? Humans typically see things as dichotomies, light and dark, white and black, good, bad. Death is often seen as the opposite of life. According to Anton in his 2020 book, life and death are not dichotomous, but a dependent hierarchy where the former is the environment for the latter. Death as the environment, the territory in which life exists, and acts as a framing effect. Anton wrote that the death is a bell calling us to action, a line in the sand forcing our hand at life. He also argued that our death does not mean the end of the world or someone else's possibilities. Our death limits our personal experience, just as a frame encloses a single picture. In this way, death is not the absence of life, but an event that marks the boundaries of it. Without a clearly marked end, our lives would have little meaning. It would be like looking at an endless array of activities, possibilities, and people and information. Bateson suggested that this picture frame tells the viewer that he is not to use the same sort of thinking in interpreting the picture that he might use in interpreting the wallpaper outside the frame. Without a frame, everything blends together in meaningless mess. We need the frame to give our lives focus. As a parting example, Jason Isbell's song, "If We Were Vampires," implies that if two lovers lived forever, much of their interactions would be less meaningful. He says, "If we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out to the sidewalk and smoke and laugh at all the lovers and their plans. I wouldn't feel the need to hold your hand. Maybe time running out is a gift. I'll work hard till the end of my shift, give you every second I can find, and hope it isn't me that's left behind. It's knowing that this can't go on forever. Likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll get 40 years together, but one day I'll be gone, and one day you'll be gone." Anton wrote, "Just as one does not dance to get to the end of a song or listen to a piece of music to get to the final beat, so too the meaning of life is not found at the end of life or somehow after it, but in living it." Camus agreed. Anton also wrote that knowledge of death is an essential aspect of existence, one that makes life meaningful. The knowledge of death need not be feared, as Epictetus suggested. I understand that death as a picture frame is not a perfect metaphor, but my hope is that it offers a new perspective at looking at the phenomenon of death. By adopting the metaphor of death as life's picture frame, we remove a little of death's sting, and we change from a decidedly negative event into something that paradoxically we cannot truly live without. Thank you.